Welcome to The Frozen Truth. I'm Noah, and a new original story awaits you. When paramedic Nora Bellwood walked into her supervisor's office and saw her own personnel file on his desk with a red stamp reading "Terminated," she wasn't even surprised. She just looked at the man who had called her the best paramedic in the district for 8 years and asked quietly, "Did you sign this yourself, or were you told to?" He didn't answer. He turned to the window. Nora picked up the cracked frame photograph from the windowsill, the only thing in that room that was truly hers. She walked out. 15 minutes later, she was sitting in her old car on the shoulder of the highway, staring at the white plains beyond the windshield, and for the first time in 42 years of her life, she didn't know where to go. But she didn't yet know the most important part. Somewhere in the frozen wilderness, 300 miles to the north, lay a man with a bullet wound in his shoulder, dying for the second day in a row. And she was the only person in the world who knew how to save him. Nora Bellwood had never thought of herself as someone worth talking about. 42 years old, average height, sturdy build, the kind used to carrying stretchers and standing for hours in the cold. Not thin, not heavy, just built for the work. Hands with reddened knuckles from ice water, from rubber gloves, from washing them 300 times a shift. She always smelled the same way: bleach, pine soap, and a faint, bitter trace of smoke from the wood stove at the clinic on the edge of Pine Hollow. For 8 years, she worked as a paramedic on the rural ambulance crew in the northern district of Cedar County. 8 years driving broken roads in a battered old truck, pulling heart attack victims out of hunting cabins, stitching up loggers right there in the woods, delivering babies in the backs of pickup trucks. And once, the whole district still remembered it, she kept a man's heart going for 4 hours by hand, waiting for the medevac helicopter, simply because she did not know how to give up. The station chief, Gerald Holloway, respected her, or at least said he did, until the day Drummond showed up. Andrew Drummond arrived in the district that September, the new chief physician of the county hospital, sent from the regional centre. 50 years old, a wide pink face, soft hands with manicured nails, smelling of expensive cologne, heavy, sweet, with notes of musk. He wore a suit and tie even on hospital rounds, and the tie was always fastened with a gold pin. At his very first meeting, he said, "Your district is a backwater. My job is to turn it into a modern medical institution. We'll start with a personnel audit." Nora sat in the back row and watched Holloway nod along. Something twisted under her ribs then, an unpleasant feeling like a premonition. She wasn't wrong. In November, Drummond ran his first review of the ambulance crew. Nora had just come back from a difficult call, a stroke at a remote logging camp. 80 miles round trip on a winter road, minus 28 degrees. Right by the locker room, Holloway caught her. "Andrew wants you. Now." She hadn't even taken off her coat yet. The chief physician's office was overheated. Drummond sat behind his desk, a stack of papers in front of him. Nora saw her own name on the top sheet immediately. "Bellwood, Nora," he said without looking up. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "Sit down." She didn't sit. "I see several violations in your work," he continued, flipping through the pages. "Exceeding the adrenaline dosage during resuscitation procedures, 3 cases. Administering medication outside protocol without authorization, 5 cases. And this." He raised his eyes. They were pale, almost colorless, and there was nothing personal in them. "A field delivery in February of last year without calling in a midwife. That's dangerous practice, Miss Bellwood." "There was no midwife to call," Nora said. "The nearest one was 80 miles away. The woman was in labor at 9 months. I did what needed to be done. You exceeded your authority as a paramedic. I saved a life. That's a matter of interpretation." He closed the folder. You'll have the opportunity to explain each incident in writing. But for now, for the safety of patients, you're suspended." Nora stood and looked at him. Outside, frost cracked against the window pane. On Drummond's desk sat a glass of tea in a silver holder. A city object, completely out of place here. "Who filed the complaints?" she asked quietly. Drummond didn't answer. She asked again out in the hallway, this time to Holloway. He turned to the window, and Nora understood everything. The next day, Drummond gathered the entire station. Nora was called into the hallway in front of everyone, the drivers, the nurses, the orderlies, even people she'd once pulled through shifts so brutal they couldn't look each other in the eye for a week afterward. Drummond stood by the bulletin board, holding her personnel file. "My colleagues should know," he said loudly, "why this person no longer has the right to drive an ambulance." The hallway went so quiet that Nora could hear water dripping from a broken faucet behind the wall. "Exceeding authority, protocol violations, unauthorized use of medication, risk to patients." He recited it slowly, as if reading out a sentence. Nora wasn't looking at him, she was looking at Eric. Eric Sanderson stood by the window, eyes down. The same Eric whose mistake she had covered for 3 years ago. The same Eric for whom she'd written a glowing reference. The same Eric who now said nothing. "Miss Bellwood," Drummond went on, "for years you've confused heroism with disciplinary violation. That ends here." One of the young nurses sniffled. Holloway turned away. Slowly, Nora took her old ambulance jacket off the hook. There was still a stain on the sleeve from that night. She held a man's heart, going for 4 hours. "You're not firing me right now," she said quietly. "You're lying to these people." Drummond smiled. "No, Miss Bellwood, I'm simply clearing medicine of dangerous improvisation." And for the first time in many years, Nora felt not pain, not shame for herself, but for everyone standing there in silence. She was let go 2 weeks later, formally, by mutual agreement, because there was nothing to sue over and no time to do it anyway. Colleagues said goodbye quietly, guiltily, looking at the floor. Only one young nurse, Tara Whitfield, 23 years old, snub-nosed, with a strand of hair always falling out from under her cap, followed her outside and said, blushing, "Miss Bellwood, I know who wrote it. It was Eric. Drummond promised him the senior paramedic position if he'd sign. I overheard it by accident. I'm sorry." Eric Sanderson, the man Nora had pulled through his certification exam 3 years ago when he'd mixed up a dosage and nearly killed a patient. The man for whom she'd written a glowing character reference. The man who smiled at her every morning. Nora nodded, said thank you, got into her car. The photograph in its cracked frame sat on her lap. A small boy about 7 in a red sweater, herself as a child, at her grandmother's cottage. Her grandmother had died the year before. There was no one left. Beyond the windshield, white plains and silence. That same evening a call came from an unknown number. "Bellwood," said a man's voice. "Yes. Listen carefully. If you go back to the district, if you go near patients, if you start filing complaints or writing anywhere, you'll go to prison. You've got unlicensed medical practice, exceeding your authority, unreported medications. There's enough there to build a case that won't just keep you off the ambulance. You won't be allowed within 300 feet of the hospital. Who is this?" A short laugh on the other end. "Someone who's advising you to live quietly." The line went dead. Nora sat in her kitchen for a long time with the phone in her hand. Then she opened a cabinet, took out her old medical kit and set it by the door. If they wanted her scared, they got their wish. She was scared. But she still put the kit by the door. For 3 weeks, Nora lived in her small apartment trying to decide what to do next. Money was running low. She wouldn't be hired back in the district. Drummond would see to that. Going to the regional centre with no connections and nowhere to live was frightening and pointless besides. A coincidence helped. if you could call it that. Valerie Higgins called, an 80-year-old woman from the remote settlement of Blackwood Hollow, whom Nora had pulled through severe pneumonia a year earlier. "Nora, dear, I heard about you. Don't grieve over it. Come stay with me a while. I've got a big house and I'm alone. There's plenty of work here. We've got no paramedic, no doctor, 4 villages out here on the edge, and people get sick with nowhere to go." "That's not official, Valerie. Nora, dear." The old woman paused. "Whatever's right is its own kind of official. Come on out." Nora packed in an hour. Blackwood Hollow turned out to be exactly what it sounded like. Dark and far away. 50 homes past the last mountain pass, 40 miles of dirt road from the highway. In winter, the snow would seal it off, and the settlement would be cut off from the world for a week at a time. Nora moved into the back room at Valerie's house, a space that smelled of dried herbs, wood oil, and old books. The house was warm, sturdy, built to last decades, not years. The first thing Nora did was walk the surrounding homes. By the end of the first day, she already had 7 patients. 2 with untreated hypertension, 1 with a wound on his leg that wouldn't heal from a logging accident, an old woman with atrial fibrillation, a man with clear signs of tuberculosis, a little girl with chronic ear infections, and a pregnant woman 7 months along, who hadn't seen a doctor since spring. Nora did what she knew how to do. She worked. On the 4th day, Samuel Whitcomb came to see her, Valerie's distant cousin, a hunter in his 60s with a face like dark bark. "You the paramedic?" he asked, right from the doorway. "Now I'm whatever's left." He looked at her for a long moment, then sat down. "There's a man in the woods, lying there 2 days now, alone. Bullet in the shoulder." Nora looked up from the bottles she had been sorting. "How bad?" "Bad," said Samuel. "Can't walk out on his own. I found him on my trap line yesterday morning, snowed into the cabin. He's got a fever. The wound's gone bad. I don't know medicine, but the cabin's a ways off. 12 miles, 3 by truck, then snowmobile, then on foot." "Who is he?" A pause. "Don't know," said Samuel, but Nora felt the pause last a second longer than it should have. She picked up her bag. The cabin was small, dark logs, a little iron stove. When Nora walked in, it was smoky and hot inside. Samuel had lit the fire before he left. A man lay on the wooden bunk. She saw him and stopped. Mid-40s, tall, even lying down you could tell. A sharp, weathered face, dark stubble. His skin had a grey pallor now. His shoulder was wrapped in someone's shirt, soaked through dark. His breathing was fast and shallow, but the strangest thing was something else. On his right wrist was a tattooed band of thin lines, almost like lace. She'd never seen ink like that on a man before, too delicate, too careful. "What's your name?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The man opened his eyes, dark grey, almost charcoal. "Doesn't matter," he said. "It matters to me. I'm Nora." She was already unwinding the bandage. "This is going to hurt." "Already hurt worse," he said, and passed out. The bullet had gone clean through. That was good, but the wound had become infected, and sepsis was beginning to set in. Nora worked for 2 hours, cleaning, draining, injecting antibiotics from her own supply. When her hands were busy, her mind shut off. That, about herself, she knew and valued. Toward morning, his fever broke slightly. He regained consciousness at dawn and stared at the ceiling for a long time before saying, "You're not sleeping?" "No need to." "Professional habit," said Nora. "Plus, the stove dies out every 2 hours. Silence. Outside the cabin walls, deep forest quiet. "Nathan," he said finally. "My name is Nathan." "Where'd the bullet come from, Nathan?" A long pause. "Hunting accident." "A hunting accident doesn't look like this." She nodded toward the wound. He closed his eyes. "Rest," she said. "The conversation isn't going anywhere. But she felt that same dark twist under her ribs again, the one that had never once lied to her. Nora spent 4 days at the cabin. Samuel brought food and firewood, quiet and methodical, as if helping a dying stranger was just his usual line of work. Nora would ask him with her eyes, and every time he gave a slight shake of his head. Not yet. Nathan was pulling through slowly, stubbornly. His constitution was strong. She could tell by how fast the wound began to close, how his breathing changed. He ate little but steadily. By the 3rd day he sat up on his own. They talked in the evenings. At first about nothing, the weather, the woods, how to read direction from tree bark. Nora realized Nathan knew this wilderness well. Too well for someone speaking about it like it was just any forest. On the 3rd evening she asked him directly, "Are you from around here?" "Was, once." "Left?" "Pushed out," he said shortly, and the way he said it, without self-pity, just as fact, told her it was a long story. She didn't push. She simply sat, stirring her tea, and waited. Sometimes silence is the best question. "I was the forest ranger here," he said after a few minutes. 15 years. I know these woods better than my own hands." He looked at his palms. 3 years ago, a new man came through, a county official. He wanted a logging operation, unofficial, off the books, good money in it. Half the district would have gotten a cut. I refused to authorize it. So they forged documents, said I'd taken a bribe myself, and fired me. Then came the criminal charge. 2 years probation. Couldn't leave the district. 2 years under investigation, then I was out. Sentence ended a month ago. Came back here to retrieve something. Documents, evidence that I hid before the arrest. Nora set down her cup. "And they shot you?" "Tried to." For the first time in days, something like a dry, wry smile crossed his voice. "Bad aim." "Do you know who?" "I have a guess." "Did they find the documents?" A pause. "No," he said. And again that pause was a beat too long. Nora watched the fire flicker through the stove's grate. "Nathan," she said, "I'm an unlicensed paramedic living with someone else's grandmother. I just got fired for saving people the wrong way. You don't have to trust me, that's reasonable, but if you need help, I'm here." He was quiet for a long while. "Why?" he asked finally. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Habit, maybe?" Outside the cabin window, snow fell quietly. The stove hummed steady. The smell of pine and burning birch filled the small space. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Nora felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. On the 5th day, when Nathan was already standing and moving around the cabin, Nora noticed something fall from the inside pocket of his jacket, hanging on a hook as she took it down to air it out. A small metal compass, old, with a worn casing, an engraving on the lid, the letters tiny. She didn't read it right away. The woods remember everyone. She put the compass back in the pocket, said nothing, but the phrase stayed in her mind. A week later, Nathan was well enough to make it to Blackwood Hollow on his own power. Nora walked beside him, officially to monitor her patient, unofficially because he was still paler than normal and held his left arm at an odd angle. Valerie met them at the door, looked Nathan up and down and said, "Good. You'll stay in the back room for now. There's a bed there. Nora, put the kettle on." No surprise, no questions. Nora understood. Valerie had known all along who was lying in that cabin. The first days in the settlement were quiet, almost peaceful, the way it feels when acute danger has passed, and the next one hasn't arrived yet. Nathan helped with chores, silent, methodical, with the same precision he seemed to bring to everything in his life. Nora watched from under her lashes as he split firewood correctly, without wasted swings, spoke briefly and respectfully with Samuel in that shared language of the woods, watched the horizon every morning standing on the porch. One day she came out at 6 a.m. and found him already there, mug in hand, looking at the white tops of the cedars. There was an expression on his face she couldn't name at first. Longing, not bitter, the kind people call love of a place. "You miss the woods," Nora said. Not a question, a statement. He didn't answer right away. 3 years in the city, he said finally. That's not for me. The city, a life without meaning. Nora thought there was no better way to say it. She took the mug from him, took a sip. The tea was strong with something herbal she didn't recognize right away. Mint. "In your documents," she said carefully, "what exactly is in there?" Nathan looked at the forest for a long time. Maps of illegal logging operations, 3 sections, each the size of a small town, forged shipping manifests, names, a pause. And one man who organized all of it, Bradley Houston, deputy director of the county administration. "Where are the documents?" "There." He nodded towards the forest. "I hid them in a hollow tree at the far ranger outpost. Old spot. I was the only one who knew it. And I never made it there." "Didn't make it." Nora handed back the mug. "Then we'll make it together." He looked at her the way you look at someone you don't understand yet, but want to. That same evening, Samuel brought news. He walked in without knocking. That was the custom out here. He sat, was quiet for a long time, then said, "Word in the district is Houston's got people out looking, says there's an escaped convict hiding in the woods. Dangerous." Gave a description. He looked at Nathan. "Yours." Promised a reward for information. Something tightened in Nora's chest. "Does anyone in the settlement know he's here?" she asked. "The old woman knows. I know. You know. Nobody else." Samuel paused. "One person might have seen you two walking together. Peter Doolan. He's unpredictable. Unpredictable like. He's a quiet man, sober, but talks too much drunk." Nora and Nathan exchanged a look. "How much time do we have?" Nora asked. "Don't know," said Samuel. "Could be a day, could be 3. The blow came sooner than a day. That night a knock at the window woke Nora. She opened it. Standing in the cold was Tara Whitfield, the young nurse from the hospital, her face white. "How did you find me?" Nora asked. "People talk," Tara breathed out. "Miss Bellwood, Drummond has a brother. He works in the county prosecutor's office. He's connected to Houston. I found a document by accident, I swear, in accounting, a fake disposal record. Drummond's billing medication to patients who don't exist and selling it. Large batches." She held out a crumpled sheet. "I photographed it, then panicked, printed it out. Miss Bellwood, they don't know I have it. Not yet." Nora took the sheet, looked it over. Everything was exactly as Tara said. More than that, in the corner of the form was the signature of the assistant chief physician. That assistant was Drummond's brother. "Tara," Nora said quietly, "do you understand what you have done?" "I do," said Tara. "That's why I drove out here." Nora looked at her, this snub-nosed, always tousled girl who had been too afraid to speak the truth when Nora was fired, and who had now driven 40 miles of dirt road in the freezing dark to make it right. "Come in," Nora said. "We'll have tea." By dawn, they had a plan. Samuel would guide Nathan to the far outpost for the documents, taking back trails known only to him. Nora would stay in Blackwood Hollow and keep radio contact. Tara would go back to the hospital, act like nothing happened, and wait. The documents from a cloud storage account Nathan had set up 3 years before his arrest needed to be combined with the physical papers from the hollow tree to form a complete evidence package, one that couldn't be torn apart in court. "There's one problem," Nathan said when they were alone. "The cloud archive. Houston might have gotten access to it through the investigative office. If the archive's been breached, they've seen everything in it, and they know exactly why I came back here." "Then they're waiting for you to go to the outpost?" "Yes. What if someone else goes to the outpost? Nora said. Someone they're not expecting, not looking for. A pause. No, said Nathan, you don't even know how to describe the spot. There's a cedar with a split trunk, he said finally. Second one, from the edge of the section on the creek side where the swamp begins, the hollow's about shoulder height. Inside a tin can, the kind condensed milk comes in, wrapped in an oiled cloth. Nora nodded, stood up. I'll be back by evening, she said. She found the cedar. She found the can. She did not find the documents. The can was empty. Nora stood in the forest, holding the empty tin, hearing only the wind in the treetops and her own breathing. The oiled cloth smelled of pine and something else, something foreign. Someone had been here recently. She looked around. The snow near the cedar was disturbed in several places, careful, skilled, but not perfect. Someone who knew how to move through woods, but not the way Nathan knew them. Her breath caught. They were too late. Nora made it back to Blackwood Hollow in the dark. Nathan was waiting on the porch. Even from a distance she saw him tense as he made out the look on her face. There's nothing there, she said. He closed his eyes, opened them. Then Houston knew from the start. Someone told him where you hid it. No one could have known. He stopped himself. No one except one person. My former assistant, Victor Lane. I trusted him. We worked together for 3 years. Nora thought of Eric, of what betrayal looks like on a face of someone you helped. Houston has the documents, Nathan said. He'll destroy them. Or he already has. He hasn't destroyed them, Nora said slowly. If he had, why would he still be looking for you? Why the bullet? They found the papers, but they don't know about the cloud archive, or they know about it but can't access it. They need your silence, Nathan. They need you. He looked at her. Something shifted slowly across his face, like ice in spring. The cloud archive, he said. It needs a password only I know. If I gave it to you, then there'd be no reason for me to stay alive. They'll come for you. They'll come for both of us, Nora shrugged. Then we'd better move before they do. Silence fell. Somewhere far off in the forest an owl called. Do you know what you're doing? Nathan asked. No, said Nora, but I rarely know in advance. That fades fast. They didn't sleep that night. Nora sat in Valerie's kitchen while Nathan spoke, brief and precise, like someone used to relaying information under time pressure. He told her about the archive, the logging scheme, the people behind Houston. 2 from the county administration, 1 in federal forestry oversight. The money flowed through 3 shell companies registered to straw owners. The total ran into the hundreds of millions. There's a journalist, he said. Daniel Ross, County News Channel. I called him 3 years ago before the arrest. He wanted to cover the story. Then he went quiet. Maybe they told him to, Nora said. Or maybe he got scared. Maybe he stopped being scared 3 years on. We don't have another option. We have to try. She checked her watch. 3 in the morning. Then she looked at the photograph in its cracked frame, which she'd set on the shelf beside the bed. The boy in the red sweater looked into the camera with that seriousness only children manage to bring to the world. Her grandmother had once told her, Nora, you're the kind of person who always gets pulled to where it's hardest. That's either a curse or a calling. You figure out which. Nora had laughed then. Now she thought her grandmother had been right both ways. By dawn, they sent the first message to Daniel Ross, unsigned, through an encrypted messenger app. Tara had shown her how. Just a short line. I have evidence in the Houston case. Get in touch. No reply came. Not in an hour, not in 2, not by noon. He won't answer, Nathan said. We wait until evening. That evening, Peter Doolan showed up. The same man Samuel had called unpredictable. a short man in his 50s with shifting eyes and a smell of cheap liquor strong enough to cut through the frost. He came right up to Valerie's house and stood at the gate. "Heard there's a city man staying here," he said when Nora came out. "The one they're looking for." "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do." He looked past her. "They offered good money for information. I'm a simple man. I need the money." Nora looked at him. Inside her was a cold deeper than the frost outside. "How much did they offer?" she asked calmly. He named a figure. "I'll give you more," Nora said. He looked surprised. "I need one thing, 2 days of silence. You don't call anyone, you don't tell anyone anything. 2 days. After that, do what you want." "Where would you get that kind of money?" "There's no money like that," Nora said. "But I have something else." She thought of the man with the leg wound that wouldn't heal, the one she now knew everything about. "Your left foot's been hurting since last summer, starting at the ankle. You think it's a sprain? It's not a sprain, it's the start of diabetic foot. Peter, if it's not treated, you're looking at amputation in a year or 2. If we treat it now, you might avoid that entirely. Your call." Doolan stared at her for a long time. Something shifted behind his eyes, then he turned and walked away. Nora stood there, not knowing what he'd decided. An hour after Doolan left, a car appeared at the edge of Blackwood Hollow. A black off-road vehicle sat without its lights on, as if it had simply broken down on the shoulder. But Samuel, returning with firewood, knew right away it hadn't broken down. "He sold us out," he said simply. Nora didn't answer. For some reason, she immediately pictured Doolan's face. Not cruel, not sly, frightened. The face of a man who'd spent his whole life choosing safe over right. A few minutes later, there was a quiet knock at the door. Doolan stood on the threshold, no hat, his face grey. "I called them," he said. "Told them I'd seen him." Nathan took a step forward, but Nora raised her hand. "Why'd you come back?" Doolan swallowed. "Because they didn't just ask about him, they asked about you too. Said the paramedic might be even more useful to them." He looked away. "I figured out they weren't just going to bring you two in." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled scrap of paper. "Here's the plate number and the name of the man who's coming. I caught it over the radio. I'm sorry." Nora looked at him for a long moment. "It's late to ask forgiveness, Peter." "I know, but it's not too late to help." Doolan nodded. "Behind the old warehouse there's a trail to the creek. It leads to a hunting cabin. No car can follow it." And only then did Nora understand. A traitor can become a witness if he gets scared of his own betrayal in time. That night, Nathan came into her room quietly, in the dark, with only a flashlight. "We need to go. Now," he said. "Doolan?" "Don't know, but Samuel saw a car at the entrance, sitting there without lights for an hour already." Nora stood without a word. She dressed in 3 minutes, grabbed her bag, a reflex she'd never lost. "Valerie?" she asked. "I spoke with her. She knows what to do." A pause. This isn't the first time for her. Nora didn't have time to ask what he meant. They slipped out through the backyard into the dark, into the woods. Outside, a sharp, biting cold, and every step crunched loud enough to sound like a gunshot. Nathan went first, silent, fast, choosing his path with such precision that Nora could barely keep up with his dark silhouette. His shoulder must have hurt. She noticed it in his posture, but he gave no sign. Behind them in the settlement a dog barked, then another. They picked up the pace. They walked for 3 hours. By the end, Nora couldn't feel her toes and was breathing like a spent horse. But she said nothing, because Nathan was silent too, and his silence wasn't grim. It was working, focused, and she trusted it. They reached a hunting cabin on a far bank of a frozen creek, small, cold, half buried in snow, but stocked with firewood and matches. While Nathan got the fire going, Nora found an old army thermos under the bunk, shook it, Empty, but she also found a can of stew and a pack of crackers. They ate in silence, almost in the dark, the only light a dancing flame through the stove's grate. "I need to tell you something," Nathan said. Nora looked up. "The documents aren't destroyed," he said. "Part of them, the real part. I didn't hide them in the hollow tree. What was in the hollow was a copy, specifically in case someone came looking, a decoy." Nora stopped chewing. "You knew you were being watched." "I suspected." He looked at the fire. "The originals are in the false bottom of Valerie's old trunk. She doesn't even know what's in there. I asked Samuel to hide them 3 years ago before my arrest." "She knew who you were," Nora said slowly, "from the start, when she called me to come." "Yes." Nora set down the can. "She knew you were in that cabin, knew you needed a doctor, and she called for me specifically." A pause. "Why me?" "Because I asked her to." Nathan looked at the fire. "I'd heard about you before. When I worked as the ranger, I'd come through the district sometimes. People talked about the paramedic on the ambulance crew who never gave up on anyone. I remembered." Nora sat there thinking about how strangely life works, how threads that seem random sometimes stretch back very far and very long ago. "Sleep," Nathan said. "Tomorrow's hard. You could have told me all this from the start." "I could have," he agreed. "I didn't know yet if I should. Now you know." A long pause. The fire crackled. "Now I know." In the morning, Daniel Ross answered. Nora held the phone, her hands trembling slightly, not from the cold. The message was short. "I only meet with people who are still alive. When?" 3 words, and everything changed. They made it back to Blackwood Hollow by noon. The car at the gate was gone. Doolan met them by the general store, stopped, didn't raise his eyes, muttered something to himself about his bad leg, and walked past. Nora exhaled. Valerie opened the trunk herself, pulling out layers, old tablecloths, letters, something wrapped in newspaper. Methodical, unhurried. At the very bottom, in a double tin lining, lay a folder. Nathan took it, opened it, looked, and for the first time Nora saw something like relief on his face. "Here," he said. "It's all here." They worked through the whole day. Tara arrived that evening, dropped everything, drove out. The 3 of them sat at Valerie's kitchen table, laying out documents, photographing, copying, organizing. Nora didn't understand half the legal terms, but she understood the principles, where the signature was, where the date was, where the amount was, where the discrepancy was. The scheme was clear. Houston authorized so-called sanitary logging operations, officially with paperwork, but the sanitary zone always turned out 5 times larger than the official records claimed, and all the excess timber flowed through shell companies for export. 3 entire sections of forest were already gone, nothing left but stumps. Drummond and his prosecutor brother provided cover. Any investigation died at the first step. And when Nathan started gathering evidence, he was removed by the hands of his own assistant, who'd been promised the ranger position. "Victor Lane," Nathan said quietly. "He testified against me. The one witness whose word was worth the entire case." "Does he know you're here?" Nora asked. "Doubtful. He thinks I left the county." "Then he has no reason to stay silent." Nora looked at the table. "If he's approached the right way, if he understands the game is over, he won't want to talk." "People talk when they're scared," she said. She looked at Nathan. "He must be terrified right now, because if Houston was willing to commit murder, and he was, then witnesses are loose ends too. Lane knows that. Or he's about to." Silence. "Call him," Nora said. "Just tell him you're alive. Nothing more." Nathan looked at her for a long time, then picked up the phone. Lane answered on the 3rd ring, and when he heard Nathan's voice, he went silent for 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a very long time when you're listening to it in silence. "Nathan," he said finally. His voice was quiet, broken. "You're alive?" "Alive? I thought—" "I know what you thought." Nathan's voice was level, without anger. "Victor, they're going to remove you too. You understand that?" A long pause. "What do I do?" Lane asked. Not a question, a statement. The voice of a man who had already made his decision, just waiting for someone to name it. "Meet with a journalist, tell him everything. I have the documents. Together it's a sentence for Houston. Separately, neither of us has a chance." Another pause. "All right," said Lane. 2 days later, they were in the county seat. Nora had never been part of anything resembling an investigative report before. She'd imagined it would feel more dramatic somehow, but it turned out to be just long and tedious. A small office, a laptop, a scanner, folders of documents that Daniel Ross read through for hours, pausing only to ask questions. The journalist was middle-aged, slightly heavy-set, with tired eyes and a sharp mind. He took his time asking the same questions twice, checking dates, making calls. Nathan answered precisely. Lane, who had come on his own without invitation, sat in the corner, speaking quietly, head down. By evening, Ross closed the folder and said, "This is a big story." "We know," Nora said. "I can't just publish the documents. I need an official response from the agency, a statement, or a refusal to comment. That takes time." "There's no time," Nathan said. "There's another way." Ross looked at him. "In 2 days, there's a regular public meeting of the District Forestry Management Commission. Houston will be there, county leadership will be there, cameras will be there." A pause. "If you walk in there with these documents, it's not an article anymore, it's live broadcast." Nora felt something shift in her chest, fear and something else, something close to resolve. "We'll be there," she said, before Nathan could answer. The 2 days before the meeting were long. Nora couldn't sleep properly. She lay in a small hotel room, staring at the ceiling, running through everything that could go wrong. Tara stayed in the district just in case. Samuel kept radio contact. One night, Nora got up and went into the hallway. Nathan sat by the window, also awake. "Scared?" he asked. "Yes. It's the right kind of scared." "How do you know?" "Because when you're not scared, you're either an idiot or a corpse." He looked out at the city lights below. 3 years ago, I wasn't scared. I thought the truth would defend itself, that it would be enough just to bring the document." A pause. "It wasn't enough. This time, it's different." "Now there's you." Nora looked at him. He was watching the window, but something in the tilt of his head said more than the words did. She didn't say anything, but she took his hand, the one with the tattooed band, and held it for a moment. He didn't pull away. The Forestry Commission meeting took place in the Assembly Hall of the District Administration Building. Nora knew the building. She'd brought reports there, coordinated routes, high ceilings, portraits on the walls, the smell of government furniture, and old linoleum. Clear's throat. The public seating, 10 rows, almost full. Local officials, forestry directors, a few people from the county department. In the corner, Ross with a camera operator, a small camera on his shoulder, officially filming a routine segment. Houston sat at the head table. Nora saw him for the first time. Heavy-set, well-dressed, with the face of a satisfied man, the kind used to things going exactly as planned. A stack of folders sat in front of him, his deputy beside him, 2 more officials. She felt Nathan tense slightly beside her. "Easy," she said quietly. "I am easy." "I'm not talking to you." He gave a small jerk of his head, something close to a laugh. The meeting went on as usual, reports, figures, harvest, statistics. Nora listened and marveled at how easily the words slid by, the words behind which entire forests disappeared. Section developed, Recreation zone restructured. No living language at all, only dead bureaucratic phrasing. When they reached the questions and proposals portion, Nora stood. "I request the floor." Houston looked at her with no interest. "Who are you?" "Nora Bellwood, paramedic." She spoke evenly. "I have documents relevant to your department's activities. I'd like to present them to the Commission." "That's not the format of this meeting." "I know, but it's the format of this," she said, nodding toward Ross's camera. The room went quiet. Not all at once. First, a few people exchanged glances, then a few more. The silence grew like rising water. "Please, sit down," Houston said. His voice was steady, but Nora noticed his fingers, resting on the table, had clenched. "I won't," she said, "with your permission." At that moment Nathan stood. Houston saw him, and Nora watched something break across the official's face. Not instantly. First recognition, then an attempt to hide the recognition, then the realization that hiding it wasn't going to work. Someone in the room said quietly, "Look, Carver," and Nora understood. People here remembered Nathan. Nathan walked to the head table, in his hands a folder. "Bradley," he said, low, almost calm. "We haven't seen each other in 3 years. I've changed, I suppose. The documents haven't." "This is a provocation," Houston said. His voice was firm, but pitched slightly higher than usual. "Carver is a convicted felon. His testimony. My testimony has nothing to do with this." Nathan opened the folder. "These are your signatures, your orders, your records of the actual logging volumes, and the registry's records of what was officially declared. The difference is 53,000 cubic meters of timber over 3 years. He set the first page on the table in front of the commission chairwoman, a middle-aged woman from the county department, looking at the paper with the expression of someone who doesn't want to believe it, but knows she'll have to. "Victor," Nathan said without turning, "you're here." Lane stood from the back rows. He was pale, upright, with the look of a man walking into something terrifying, having already made his decision. "I confirm these documents," he said. "I was present for the preparation of part of them. I gave false testimony during the investigation under duress. I'm ready to repeat that officially." The room held its breath. Houston stood. He opened his mouth and said nothing, then he took a step to the side. An empty space opened up behind the table. He sat back down, then stood again. This is illegal interference with the Commission's proceedings," he said finally. "I demand—" The Commission chairwoman looked at him over her glasses. There was no anger in her voice, only exhaustion. "Sit down." He sat. And Nora watched something drain out of him, that familiar certainty of a man who's never been touched by consequences, as if someone had pulled the ground out from under him. Then she noticed one of the deputies beside him quietly, almost imperceptibly, slide his chair a little further away, and then the assembly hall door opened. Drummond walked in, not alone. Beside him was his brother, the prosecutor's office employee, whose signature appeared on the documents closing the investigations. Nora felt her fingers go cold. Drummond saw her and stopped for a second. The same expression flickered across his face that she'd seen once in his office, the certainty of a man used to deciding other people's fates with a single signature. "And now," said Ross, rising from his seat, "I'd like to enter one more document into the record for the live broadcast." The operator turned the camera. Ross set copies of the medication disposal records on the table. "Here is the signature of Chief Physician Drummond. Here is his brother's signature. Here are the fictitious patients. Here is medication recorded as dispensed to patients, then funneled through intermediaries. And here, a memo regarding the need to eliminate Bellwood N as a source of potential complaints." Someone in the room gasped. Nora didn't move. Drummond went pale, not right away. First, he tried to smile. "This is a forgery." Tara Whitfield stood up from the second row. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "It's not a forgery. I worked with these records. I'm ready to testify." Drummond turned to her so sharply it looked like he wanted to strike her with a glance. "Do you understand what you're doing?" Tara went pale but didn't sit down. "I understand now." The commission chairwoman took off her glasses. "Call the police," she said. And in that moment Nora watched for the first time a man who had broken other people's lives start searching the room with his eyes for a way out. Drummond and his prosecutor brother were arrested the next day. Nora learned about it from Tara, who called that morning, her voice trembling with barely held excitement. "Miss Bellwood, they came. They took Drummond straight out of his office." Nora sat on the bed in her hotel room, holding the phone, not entirely sure what she felt. Not triumph, that much was certain. Something quiet, heavy, like earth after rain. Then Nathan knocked. He came in, sat in the only chair, looked at her. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know," she said, honestly. "That's normal." "Are you glad?" He thought for a few seconds, really thought, not just for the answer. "No," he said. "Glad isn't the word. He looked at his hands, at the tattooed band. 3 years I thought about it every day, how it would all come out, how justice would—" He paused. "That word used to annoy me. It seemed empty. And now? Now it carries weight, because it costs something." A pause. "Have you ever thought about what you'll do next?" "No." "You're lying." "I think you have." She conceded the point. "I just don't know where. Maybe the license can be restored. Maybe not. Or maybe I leave for good." She shrugged. "I've gotten used to not planning ahead." "Blackwood Hollow needs a paramedic," Nathan said. "Officially. I spoke with Samuel. They want to open a real clinic with a midwife on staff. They've been trying for a long time, but there's been no specialist. If you're interested." Nora looked at him. "Are you staying?" A long pause. "I've got nowhere to go but back," he said. "This forest is mine. I know it better than I know myself." He didn't finish the thought. Nora waited. "And you're there," he said quietly. Outside the hotel window, the April wind carried the first scents of thaw, damp earth, last year's pine needles, something sharp and alive. Nora sat and listened to that smell and felt something close to what she didn't know how to say out loud, what her grandmother used to simply call being in the right place. A year later, Blackwood Hollow welcomed summer earlier than usual. In the first week of June, the wild cherry blossomed so heavily that white clusters lay on the dark branches like snow, only warm, alive, fragrant. The scent drifted in through the open window of the clinic, small, freshly repaired, with a new porch made of larch wood and a tidy sign that Samuel had carved himself. Nora sat at her desk, writing notes, that part she loved. A medical chart was like a small story of a person's life, who breathed how, who aged how, who was healing. Living people, written down on paper. Outside in the yard, a man limped around with his leg. Doolan. Peter, who now came by every 2 weeks. His diabetic foot was responding to treatment slowly, but it was responding. He never said a word about that night he'd stood at the gate asking about money. Nora never brought it up either. There was no need. Drummond got 4 years, less than she'd expected. His brother got probation, which felt downright unfair. But Houston got 8 years and full asset forfeiture. The logging scheme was unravelled, piece by piece. Several federal officials were suspended, 3 fired outright. The 3 clear-cut sections were declared protected land, and a restoration program had begun. Nathan knew it would take 40 years at least. He talked about it calmly, the way you talk about a project you won't live to see finished, but do anyway. Eric Sanderson, the man who had written the complaint against Nora, got the senior paramedic position at Drummond's hospital. When Drummond was arrested, the new chief physician ran a personnel audit and found several serious violations dating to exactly the period of Sanderson's seniority. He was fired. Without malice, without ceremony, just fired. Nora heard about it by accident through Tara. She felt nothing in particular about it. Just thought, sometimes the wheel turns on its own. Nathan worked as a forest ranger again, reinstated by court order, with an official record of exoneration. He left on his rounds early, sometimes before dawn, came back smelling of resin and pine needles with that steady silence Nora had learned to read by now. A good silence, not empty. In the evenings they'd sit on the clinic's porch, or the porch of his cabin, which he'd repaired over the winter, and watch the wilderness darken. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. One evening he took the compass off his belt and let her hold it. She felt the cool metal in her palm, read the engraving. The woods remember everyone. Whose was it? She asked. My father's. A pause. He was a ranger too. Died young. I didn't understand for a long time why I took up this work. Now I understand why. Because someone has to. He took the compass back. Someone has to remember that the forest isn't a resource. It's a place. A living place. Nora looked at the darkening treetops and thought she could say the same thing about people, that someone has to remember a person isn't a statistic, but a place, a living place that needs someone to come and stay close by. Tara Whitfield transferred to a hospital in another county, closer to the city, closer to her family. She sent a card at New Year's. Miss Bellwood, thank you. I didn't know you could do it that way. Now I know. Nora set the card next to the photograph in the cracked frame. The boy in the red sweater still looked out at the world with that childlike seriousness that hadn't yet learned fear. Just a question. What comes next? Nora smiled. Next, this. The scent of wild cherry through an open window, a knock at the door at 7 in the morning, the first patient, the crunch of snow underfoot in winter, the squelch of mud under boots in spring, a radio on the wall, a medical bag by the door, and a man who walked into the woods at dawn and came back at dusk, who knew where the split cedar stood, who remembered every trail, who had once said, "The woods remember everyone," and hadn't needed to explain, because it was understood without words. Bradley Houston walked out of the courthouse in handcuffs. Nora wasn't there for the sentencing. She heard about it from the news. She looked at the photo on her phone, a grey man in a grey suit, hands restrained. The photographer had caught the exact moment Houston turned and looked back into the room, at the people who no longer looked at him. She closed her phone, stepped out onto the porch. The wilderness stood quiet, dense, alive, the way it had looked, and would go on looking for a long time yet, as long as someone kept watching over it. Nora reached into her jacket pocket. There was a hair tie inside, plain black. She pulled it out, tied back her hair. Professional habit. No time to fix it during work. And she went to open the clinic doors. The first patient was already waiting at the step. They say injustice is when bad things happen to good people and the guilty walk free. But maybe injustice is also when a good person locks themselves away in fear, in resentment, in the belief that the right people can't be found, that there's no one left to help, that everything's already been decided without them. Nora Bellwood didn't go into the woods looking for heroism. She went because there was nowhere else to go. And that's exactly why it worked. Dear listeners, thank you for staying with this story to the end. Nora wasn't a hero. She was an ordinary person who one day got pushed out the door for doing her job honestly, and she didn't hide. She went to where it was hardest and did what she knew how to do. A question for you. If you were unfairly fired and two paths opened in front of you, fight it through official channels or go where you are truly needed, which would you choose? Write it in the comments. We genuinely want to know. If this story moved you, leave a like. It helps other people find it. Subscribe to Frozen Truth so you don't miss the next one, and share it with someone going through a hard time right now. Sometimes a story like this is exactly what's needed at exactly the right moment. Until next time.